Welcome to Coruzant Technologies, home of the Digital Executive Podcast. Do you work in emerging tech, working on something innovative, maybe an entrepreneur? Apply to be a guest at www.coruzant.com/brand. Welcome to the Digital Executive. Today's guest is Ulaş Güler. Ulaş Güler is the co-founder and COO of Noah Labs, where the team is building Sentinel, an air-gapped AI IDE purpose-built for regulated industries. Ata leads business initiatives across growth, operations, and partnerships with a focus on legacy code, modernization in COBOL, Ada, Fortran, as well as multi-agent architectures designed for IL5 and NIST-compliant environments. His work spans product strategy, go-to-market, and building the early relationships that position Noah Labs at the frontier of secure AI software development. Alongside his work at Noah Labs, Ata brings experience from Lotus AI, where he is a senior consultant advising financial services and private equity clients, including Goldman Sachs portfolio companies, on AI strategy and value realization. Well, good afternoon, Ata. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon, Ryan.
Nice to meet you, my friend. I really appreciate it. You're navigating just a couple of time zones. You're up in Palo Alto, California. I'm in Kansas City. So again, I won't hold that against you. You know, Chiefs and the 49ers play some football and some past crazy playoff games, but I appreciate you really making the time. I know it's hard sometimes. So Ata, let's jump into your first question. You've built your career at the intersection of engineering, AI strategy, and operations, now serving as this chief operating officer of Noah Labs. What experiences shaped your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, to answer the question, it's kind of like a bit of a winding road, honestly. So I studied computer engineering at Purdue with a concentration in AI and machine learning. And I was just always drawn to the intersection of like just technical depth and like real world application. And I wasn't just interested in like building things. I wanted to understand how they actually created value on these huge, complex organizations. So that curiosity is basically what pulled me toward consulting pretty early on. And I joined a firm, Lotus AI, that's London headquartered, while I was finishing my degree. And that experience was very beneficial and formative in ways, I didn't fully appreciate at the time. So I was working like directly with private equity firms and financial institutions, and some of them were like Goldman Sachs portfolio companies. We helped them cut through like the noise around AI and figure out what actually moves that needle for their business. And what I kept running into over and over was this massive gap between the AI, it's like what the industry was building, and what these Goldman Sachs organizations actually needed. And the tools that were designed, most of the tools that they use, they were designed for a different world. Oh, and we use this in our startup, this kind of analogy, a world with like clean data, modern infrastructure, no regulatory constraints, basically. And those clients, they lived in the opposite world. So by the time Murat, our CEO, brought me into the early conversations around Noah Labs, I had a good picture, right, of the problem we were going after. I wasn't coming in as this pure technologist or pure engineer from Purdue or pure business person. I had sat across the table from customers we're now selling to, and I kind of understood their pain because of my previous experience. And that background, I would say, is what shapes how I approach my role today as the COO, whether that's GTM, right, go-to-market partnerships, or the early pilots we're running with these prime companies or financial institutions mainly. Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Love the background. We always start these podcasts out with kind of where you started and where you are today. And I liked that your education was heavily immersed in AI and engineering, and you had an insatiable curiosity in this space, which obviously helped kind of lead you where you are today. So in your experience in building AI systems, you found this gap, especially around security and compliance. And again, big gap there, still a gap there, but I'm glad what you're doing today, working with Noah Labs, which we're going to just dive in here to in a second. So at Noah Labs, you're building Sentinel, an air-gapped AI IDE for regulated industries. What problem did you see in traditional software development that led you to this innovation?
Yeah. So we started with code translation. I guess the simplest way I can put it is, so the organizations with the most critical software in the world are also the ones that have been most completely ignored by the modern developer tools. So we started with code translation. Most of these huge companies, they have legacy code bases, COBOL, Fortran, C, and they work with these code bases because one, yes, they work well, but they're not memory safe. They're very slow. And companies want to modernize these code bases. And most modern companies, like, they use Cursor, Windchill, GitHub, Copilot. These are incredible. But most of them assume you have internet access. They assume your code base is relatively modern, or probably Python or TypeScript, right? They've been probably hosted on GitHub, probably a few 100,000 lines at most. So they assume your developers can just start using a cloud-connected tool without any security review. But these prime companies, let's take a government software team, for example. They might be maintaining a site control system written in, let's say, an old language. Let me say, like ADA, for example, or a logistics platform, or a financial institution, right? Like those companies that I mentioned with Lotus AI, like COBOL, very famous old legacy code base that nobody has touched in 15 years because that one person, there's this one person who understood. They retired, right? We wanted to focus on those codes and wanted to translate them with AI. That's how we started Sentinel. Those companies want to use AI, but they can't because most of these tools connect to the internet. They connect to cloud. They send data out of your computer. Sentinel mitigates that, and it does all of that offline without any internet connection. So that's the gap we're closing with Sentinel, basically. And we built it from the ground up for those constraints. Like I said, it's air gapped by default. It's optimized for these legacy languages, and it's capable of holding an entire code base in context at once. I would say that that's the problem we saw. And honestly, once you see it, it's really hard to unsee because these regulated spaces, they're very important for the economy. The market is huge. And Murat, also our CEO, has had prior experience in this space. So that's what we wanted to invest. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I'll just highlight a few things here. Obviously, the gap you're looking to solve there, you used AI, you developed this code translation for these companies in the regulated space that are running legacy platforms and code bases like Fortran and COBOL, which I think is cool. I have some experience back in the day with some of those, and I migrated a lot of systems from those platforms. But yeah, doing it without internet is obviously a challenge, and you guys were able to solve that. Obviously, and of course, in these very secure and regulated environments, you do need to have top security. And I know that's why you also had this stuff air gap. So I appreciate you unpacking that. And Ata, your platform Sentinel is designed for IL5 and NIST compliant environments.
Right. Yes.
How do strict compliance requirements shape the way AI tools are designed and deployed?
Okay. They shape like everything, literally everything. Because I think the people outside of the space, regulated space, they underestimate just how deep those constraints go. It's not like you can just take an existing AI IDE and just flip a switch to make it compliant, right? You have to rethink the entire architecture, the orchestrator of the AI, the models that you use. So I guess I could talk about something as basic as like model inference. In a standard consumer AI tool, when you type a question, so what happens is like that prompt, it leaves your machine, it goes to a data center somewhere, and then it gets processed by a large model, and then you get a response. Response comes back. So it's the whole model. Now, in an IL5 environment, which most government agencies, most defense companies, most companies in these regulated spaces require, that data cannot leave the machine. Yeah, period. Like you just can't call out to OpenAI. You can't call out to drop it. You can't pull out to anyone. The model has to live on locally, on-premise, or air-gapped. So those three terms we use. And that creates a whole cascade of technical challenges, right? Because the models that run locally tend to be smaller, and smaller models tend to perform worse. So we've had to invest heavily in building and fine-tuning those custom models that are optimized specifically for the languages and patterns you find in those code bases, government code bases. I mentioned in my previous response, but ADA, Fortran, COBOL, C. So languages that frontier models have very little training data on, because most of the open source code on the internet is Python and JavaScript. Most of those models are they have not been trained with these legacy code bases. And then beyond the model itself, you have things like audit trails, code attribution, formal verification. And in these industries, regulated industries specifically, so if an AI writes a piece of code and it ends up in a production system, you need to know exactly what the model did and why. You need to be able to trace it. You need, the level of traceability is something consumer tools, like commercial tools, weren't built to provide, but it's a baseline requirement for us for these IL5 plus requirements. So in a lot of ways, compliance isn't a constraint that slows us down. It's actually the core of what I would say differentiates Sentinel from everything else on the market, like Cloud Code, Cursor, Windsurf. Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I know it does take a lot. As you started to say at the beginning there, a lot of times you have to redesign these environments from the ground up due to the regulatory requirements of IL5 and NIST. But you did spend a lot of time investing in developing for these fine-tuned, highly complex environments. And of course, what I heard was important was that traceability, that auditing, guardrails, and it's a totally different game when you're in these types of environments that have so much regulations.
Totally different battlefield. Most tools, modern tools, they just don't operate well. They're very good models, but they're mostly focused on the consumer side, commercial side. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And Atta, as we look ahead to the future, how do you see secure AI development evolving over the next decade? And what role will platforms like Sentinel play in shaping the future of software engineering in regulated industries?
So I came to an event today in San Francisco. It's hosted by Coda Capital, one of the big venture capital firms in San Francisco. And a lot of the portfolio companies here are just presenting their ideas, presenting their products, presenting like market research, where the AI is going, where the market is leading to. I just genuinely, I've just been impressed constantly. And I think we're generally at a pivotal moment. The last few years have just proven that AI can dramatically accelerate software development. It's just no longer a hypothesis. It's been demonstrated. But I would say, I guess, to tie it to Sentinel, we just haven't figured out yet as an industry is how to bring those gains to the parts of the software world where the stakes are highest. Defense systems, healthcare infrastructure, financial systems, energy, like critical government software. That's where the work is still undone. And I would say over the next decade, I think you're going to see a real change. On one side, you'll have a consumer and commercial AI tooling ecosystem, which will keep moving incredibly fast, of course, and getting better and better for modern C-field development. But on the other side, you'll see a whole category of just secure, compliance-native AI infrastructure, specifically for these regulated environments. And that category, that category that still, barely exists right now. That's the space that Noah Labs is building into. Yeah, I would say that. And what I found really exciting about where Sentinel fits is that we're just not building an ID about it. Like we started with code translation, but now it evolved into a fully packaged IDE. It can do code generation, formal verification. We have 15 features, and code translation is just one of them. But our future vision is to build ASOs, autonomous software operators, human intervention AI agents for these regulated spaces. And I'm sure that the market is becoming agentic. Everything is turning into agents right now. And we want to bring those agents to these regulated spaces, air-gapped, offline, optimized agents, basically. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You talked about a couple things here that really resonated with me. You see the future expanding and advancing to a point where compliance native AI development is commonplace, which I think is pretty cool. And then you talked about those ASOs, autonomous software operators, and you're absolutely right. Agentic AI has been probably the top keyword listed out on the internet for the past 18 months, and it's only getting busier as we look at agentic systems and where they're going today. So I appreciate that. And Ata, it was such a pleasure having you on today, and I look forward to speaking with you real soon.
Well, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Bye for now.